Hello everyone. Today's talk is titled, When You Trust the Life You Live. There are moments when you look at the human experience that you simply notice that you have been interpreting everything that was meaningful for you. And so that creates a sense of observance in you where you look around, you're looking at the world around you, and you are seeing that the whole deal with truth is beginning at first with the human being choosing to interpret itself and choosing to create a self-aware body. When that moment the child recognizes itself in the mirror, that is the creation of a projection. That is an experience of a simultaneity. What that means is that we as human beings are not just working with the intelligence and the life of what we are physically, but also how we are associating to sound and how sound is presenting imagery and structure in our mind. When I say apple, you envision an apple. So this is suggesting that man is considering on a subtler level the actuality of his reality before he sees it in a sense. What that means is you get a sense of where you're going to before you go there. And you need to really see where you're getting that, because every present moment in which your energy is making a new consideration of the world around it, there is a new world created. And you know, within the atmosphere of our abstraction, you really see that when you try to think about the thinker, there is nothing there for you. There is nothing there for you aside from a table in which there's clay in which you're moving with your hands. And thought and certainty thought is making this clay and worshiping just like idols our ideas. Many people may not believe in God, but there's so much ideal worship going on. In the sense that our certainty is not being paid attention to in regards to its existential opening rather than the opening of how we're going to survive in the future if we don't do our job, or a certain job or something. You see? When you look at fear, you need to begin to see why it's even there. And you can't just say it's a natural reason too. We don't have the right to say it's because of this. We don't know. We are part of the changing process. How can one puzzle piece know the whole puzzle? Based on the nature of us being individual, we are then from that individuality getting a greater understanding of individuality, which is always happening within the lights of collectivity. What that means is, what I'm curious to know is we must make educational programs where kids at very young ages, we get their opinions on the world. We just get the opinion on the youth on the world. Many people say that the youth are not listening to their elders. And in some settings they're not. But you need to see that the youth does not even have a voice yet. For the elders have not even decided to honestly listen. When you listen, that does not mean just hearing the words of that person. That means really seeing why that person is talking that way. And then you deciding based on how clear your moment of being is whether you want to contribute to another being's reality or not. But on some level, you are existentially responsible for your vision. So to choose to be too separate in a world that is integrative in nature is the fallacy that was never here. Do you see? You will see that individuality is governing you not based on what you're seeing as individual, but how the individual is being perceived. What that means is in my life early on, I went through some failures, and from those failures, I extracted wrong meaning. What that means, I felt that the failure was pushing me back to try harder, but no. Sometimes some failures are moments where you must stop your storyline as a character and observe the whole existence and nature of the storyteller. And then your perception will come sometimes from empty moments, sometimes very great aspects of what I consider to be my thinking, in quotations. We don't want to use that word too much. But thinking is empty moments. Sometimes there's an emptiness, but it doesn't mean the intelligence is not there. Just because you ask a question and someone is not answering it does not mean they do not know it. It simply means that the moment for you to receive an answer has not come. Because there have been certain moments where I have stood in front of certain people and they have asked me a question where I could have, just give them not an answer, but such a grand scene to observe, But I could not say a single word. It's as if in that moment, life did not want me to say anything to this person, and I needed to just be there as observant. It's a very profound quality when you realize that you are helping your friend not because he's suffering, because he's gonna die, because he's poor, because existentially existence cares for itself. When it's suggesting that each unique existential point of attention is surviving, you are going for physical survival. Even, let us take away even the concepts of in regards to spiritual context and religious context and just collective conscience. Just want to say that to know yourself is a bit deeper than you think. Much deeper, actually, than you think. And when you look at the advancements of man, you are taking care of the life form that you are. So as an observant intelligence who is aware that you are existing, that you are self-aware in the mirror, you are taking care of the form in the mirror. Now look around you and see this is the same form as all the forms, all the other human beings around you. So the point is not the pieces to, in a sense, be fighting all the time. It's not about how this physical plane changes. It's about how the self-aware being, the pilot of consciousness, is transitioning through this clouded area. Do you see? You're working with reality not based on your interpretation, because you can't trust your interpretation, it seems. Man seems to not be able to trust his perception. That's why he doesn't know if he has extrasensory perception or not. So you need to begin to see that perception is not something that the individual is seeking. Perception is something collectively given when your lack of association is giving you more of a holistic presence. Your silence is a sanctuary of great existential understanding, deep existential understanding. What that means is, after I've observed the nature of how the human being can just be, and in that beingness be many actions simultaneously, just that sense of multidimensionality in regards to a self-conscious being, I am fascinated to see what others have. Because it's a state of consciousness thing. At first I thought it was something where it's given to you, but it's not relevant. What that means is man was not just defined properly to us. And it's because it never could. Because our intelligence is beyond mankind, and so there's this external dimension where Mr.Within playfully says it's how you look like, how you're living in the world. It's the world you live, it's the character and its specific story, And there's a vertical dimension. And that was a horizontal dimension. There's a vertical dimension, which this vertical dimension has nothing to do with your story, but has everything to do with the intelligence that is aware of the story, which is the same intelligence within the depths of the eyes of the individual. There's a profundity in individual conception. It is not just individual conception. People are moving past it. Your moment of being is suggesting your intelligence is the awareness to everything rather than all those things you think it is. What that means is man must be aware that his body is his reality. That there are many bodies within the same body. We have many cells of consideration within the human body. Similarly, we have many considerations of an individual mind within a collective mind. And this collective mind is not some figure in a book. This collective mind is an understanding of all figures, in which when you are perceiving life with such direct experience, no ideology needs to bother you. The seers of thought have been born. Advanced communicators are walking calmly in the knowing that they are aware how their communication is projecting worlds. What that means is if you're not aware of what your moment is holding, you will always feel empty-handed. As an intelligent being within this cosmos. When you trust the life you live, you are noticing that the lack of trust came from simply not even an idea, association, or sense of self even, but an experience in your memory, in your awareness that is the response is that sense of self. Sometimes who we are is just a response to our environment in regards to trying to do what's right. What that means is I've seen people who've been very, very kind-hearted people, but suddenly when the crowd grew, they couldn't stand on their own. Their voice changed. Their opinions went away and they accepted everything that the environment was saying. And it wasn't done in a conscious way either. It was done in a way where you're trying to satisfy the environment, but you don't realize, dear being, you are the multidimensionality. You are the self-awareness in which the environment is satisfying your moment. So freedom of speech is one way of human experience being free, let's say. And there's a freedom of being, where you are aware as an existential form of your formless presence that is untouched, for it is beyond space and time. Do you see? So what that means is when you think about the transcendental objects of time and space for a little bit, you begin to see that there is no ideology that needs to be here. There is no word that needed to be spoken, but somehow this talk has taken these steps. It has come in this way which I am speaking to you, based on the experiences I've had in my youth and just pretty much the experiences I've had my whole life coming to be meaningful here. You know, I find that mankind must develop self-awareness or clarity, because if he does not, it would be dangerous in the sense that he will not see what is here. What that means is, imagine the store being open, but you are going there and trying to open the door and you can't. And you're like, gosh, it looks open, but it's closed, you know? And so you just pay attention and you realize that you had to push it in. Do you see? You had to try a different approach to access that reality and access that projection. Sometimes you might think that you want to suddenly be a millionaire because you saw some guy on TV do it. But perhaps the way you are intended to become abundant in this life is based on not your physical change, but more the change in your state of being. What that means is depression is many people forgetting the state of being where they are clear, where there's clarity. When you consciously put the intention of moving in this life and you trust the life you live, it's as if in one manner of existing, you are not clouded by duality, for you are not seeking salvation. It's as if you're not caring about whether you go to heaven or not, because it was not about that. The actuality of experience is much more clear, and mankind has been eluded. What that means is we are talking about problems that are not our problems. There are realities in which we are just contributing with our attention, and that's why they're remaining here. Your attention must become naturally inspired. What that means is you walk, and as you walk, you begin to see that you have always been walking. For then you will see the individual consciousness is able to be collectively conscious. Mr. Within would like to also communicate that I think now is the proper time to say it for the Western audience. You see, science was a great step forward, but it's taking too much of the spotlight of the attention, in the sense that there is not being enough exploration done for consciousness in regards to one being aware what one existentially is. What that means is, regardless of however the system is behaving, just like man, the organizations of his governance too are made of men who also have deeper questions on their existence. So existential exploration means an allowance for things to happen. It's becoming a bit kind of odd how man is this animal on this planet who suddenly has gotten this profound self-awareness, and this self-awareness has populated all over the planet, and suddenly they've built systems and societies where the system that is imposed by one being on a planet, one being, like, how much could man know everything that's going on in the planet? Obviously he could not know all of it, so his systems would not be perfection, but only perfect to the limitation that was taking one step higher. We are here in the realm of ideology, walking among gods and men and technological advancements and fantasy and science fiction and every idea known to man and every truth known to man and every word communicated. We are walking in this cloud. Tell me, who sees the limitless sky? Because if the clouds were the five senses, the limitless sky had nothing to say, had nothing to be. Non-existence was found in the wisdom of being. And of course, the pilot of consciousness is understanding everything through the self. Because the self is the most immediate area in which one must update. Updating of the self can work in various ways. In other words, you become aware of how your individuality is working with another sense of individuality, but you can also become aware how your individuality is, let's say, in a collectivity. So let's say you are living among other human beings, so individual moving towards a collective, physical individual moving towards a collectively physical experience, you know. And there's a manner where the individual knows of the collective before, so it's actually a way of living life where through a collective consciousness you're experiencing your individuality. So there is, in a sense, no individuality, but an awareness to your whole moment in which reality is present in. So you don't know if you had a good time or a bad time because you're not considering time. Every moment, wherever you go, it is the intelligence of your moment that is receiving and bringing what needs to be there. Sometimes depression happens when you have too much information and you're not looking at the information properly. When suddenly I give you too much information and you don't get your own ideas and ways of looking at it for the first time, then your mind, it's as if I am creating rules in your mind. And right now the human mind is filled with rules because it is basing its movements on an ordered structure, and simply science is suggesting this very well. However, the order is not the only aspect of study, because the order is very non-linearly being observed through a chaotic view. And what that means is that I have found a unique thing, just to make a unique note on scientific experimentation. And in a sense, the observer effect will always be a mystery to us unless you acknowledge simultaneous realities, not as something the individual idea understands, but something that the being multidimensionally is. It's through remembrance where you are letting go of the need to remember, and that is why you're reaching. That is why you're remembering your higher state of being, in a sense, based on the low reference you are keeping for yourself. So, it turns to a point where we are not alone. We are present in this world. Our presence is beyond our personality, which is suggesting our form. You can either try to physicalize your abstraction, your sense of abstraction, even though you'd see you won't be able to get it pinpoint accurate. What that means is, regardless of how perfect perhaps Martin Luther King's speech was in his experience, internally his speech might have been 100 times greater than the great speech he gave, For him, inside him, it could have been more because all his experiences were lighting up and all his truths, So, in a manner, as one becomes observant of the self, one is freed from the chains of other. When you become existentially responsible and realizing that you're not just here to, get a job and retire, you're here to study the nature of life. The self is the most important area of study, which will lead you to an understanding that to be alone or to talk about things and to be in those realities is not the actual reality. And man must increase his allowance of perception by the intuitive and innate guidance that is within him. Because that guidance is his own guidance. It is you on some level. You will see it. When a mirror is the only thing you have in reality, you were always looking at yourself directly. You were always seeing the absolute, but it was just that the nature of the mirror was giving a reflection that you were not absolute. When we look at science, and in regards to scientific experimentation, it becomes very evident that you need to have two areas in which the experimentation changes. So if science does not acknowledge that we're multidimensional beings, it will not see how we have actually another way of experimenting with our individuality and our physicality that is not oriented based on our reality, but a simultaneous subtler reality in which we are present in. Gosh, this is very hard to explain. To simplify this, if you were to hold a pen in your left hand and hold a pen in your right hand and kind of hold these parallel to one another and then twist one of them 90 degrees in the sense that it's like a cross, you begin to see when you're holding two pens, one above the other, in a parallel manner, when you look from the top, they're perpendicular. It's like a cross. But when you look at it from another dimension, it's parallel. I feel I need to explain this example again. It's good I brought two pens today. Okay. Let me see. Okay. So, get a pen in your right hand, get a pen in your left hand, and hold these beside one another. As you hold these beside one another, make a cross. So literally make a cross with these two pens. And look at the cross. Just, your right hand can hold one pen horizontally and your left hand can hold it horizontally. Now connect these two pens. Now you're looking at that cross. Now as you're looking at this cross, just raise your right hand and hold the left hand still. And as you raise it, you begin to see that within your perception, you have made a cross, but it is also parallel too. It's as if there's a perpendicular way of seeing these two pens, and there's a parallel way of seeing it because they're not touching. So what that means is our illusion is as if when we look at this, where mankind is right now, he's looking at these pens from the top, so he's both seeing them be a cross, but on some level, he knows they're parallel. It's as if on some level, we know physically we're here, but we also know it's not just that. Do you know? So simply what this suggests is that experimentation is lost to its world, but the experiencer is the originator of the world. And when there's an originator of the world, there is no study that can beat absolute experience, absolutely direct experience. What that means is that yogi who went into a cave, who went into a retreat in the Himalayas, went there for nobody else other than to see where life is and what life is. Some of the greatest moments I've seen among friends is the moments where they understand things through their silence, and you just know it because like the feeling and the energy of the room shifts in a way. When you remember yourself, you guys can also put the pens down. Yeah. When you remember yourself, you are beginning to see how you made choices and how you have come here. When that intensifies and you have observed what you remember, you begin to see that on some level there is an abstract conception going on in the present moment. So am I really seeing what's in the past, or am I creating it in the present based on the practice I have? And this is where you will mystically engage life by seeing that, okay, the reason they said you got to do some practices, like there were some spiritual practices, was not that you needed, like they were the truth. The practice was there to, in a sense, get your solid state of consciousness, individual state of consciousness, and to liquefy it, you know? So the ice begins to melt and you begin to flow much better in regards to understanding this reality. That was simply the purpose of a spiritual practice. It is to alter consciousness to a more able state of being. And mantras also, I believe, are here for that similar purpose as well. But they're also doors to more than what man can speak about. I hope that this talk has served you. Really, when you trust the life you live, you immediately come to the present moment and you're here and now. When you don't trust the life you live, when something comes, whether it's your greatest fear or whether it's some confrontation, you will immediately think, oh gosh, what's going to happen to me? And so you're no longer in the present moment and your ability decreases. This mindfulness is natural, and developing it in a way where you are not a person looking for someone who has better answers. You are a person who's trying to look at the greatness of your answers. And so your problems should not be other people's problems. What that means is, for example, the concept of a hell is, not that I have many comments on it, but just that it was not in my experience because I wasn't in hell. So how could I know what it is if I'm not in it? So I'm imagining it. And so my imagination is being experienced by me on a more realistic level. And that's not wrong, actually. That's actually a bit more higher in a state of consciousness than someone who is not acknowledging the abstraction of thought as part of the clarity of vision. Because there is no reason to have a reason to be convinced so much in this world. No reason. And many wars and battles are beginning because men are convinced that they are right. Some men are convinced that they're right. They think, all right, I'm right. This is going to happen. But it's not about that. It's about the quality of experience being, in a sense, enhanced, not based on a certain spectrum, but based on how much you are being aware of the observer that you are. The vertical dimensions are states of consciousness that are taking you out of a need for imagery to constantly create an individuality. As it does, man is still a young species. So unless some beings right now stand up and we all create some new renaissances, we're not going to have the proper knowledge to handle the multidimensional expressions of the future which are naturally opening, you know? It's as if mankind has been so slow in getting rid of his ideas that he is this lost individuality that the world's like, all right, it's fine, mankind. Let me just transcend, you know? And so it's as if the state of consciousness of the greater being that we are within, whether it is a Gaian interpretation or an unspeakable collectively conscious interpretation, you know, you are not bothered by that which is not here, and so you were never bothered. These are, of course, on considerations on an existential level in regards to the subtlety of thought. So externally, everything's here, this is you, there's nothing being said that needs to change your shape. It's not about whether you're doing the right things or not in regards to your physicality, guys. It is more of externally. In other words, when you have an external reality, you must be able to handle it. So learn the proper sciences, the proper teachings, but always be standing on the terrace of your greater knowing. So you're seeing things from a point where you're not being shaped, but just because someone tells you you're this or that. But also do not take your conditioning as something which is suddenly like the worst thing ever. The way you've been brought up, the way you've been conditioned, whether you feel like a fool or a wise man or a smart man or whatever, you know, whatever you feel like, it is beyond form. And you begin to see. It's like that moment where human beings look in the eyes of one another and are like, yeah, we're more than just temporal beings. You know? And they just go have a good time, you know? You know? So it's very important to recognize this, but also not to be too aggressive. What that means is science has been a bit aggressive because it's trying to make its point clear by bashing the points that are not clear. So it seems that science is finding its accuracy by judging what has been here before, you know, in regards to an illusory perception, you know, such as, you know, we don't believe in fantasies, we believe in photons, you know. So it's very important to to see that for the sake of science, man must have an exploration of his being where abstraction can, he can have the opportunity to choose how he interprets abstraction. Do you know? These are, let us say, not human rights, these are manifestation rights. We need to see that consciousness is simple and complex at the same time. What that means is there are certain aspects of our understanding which the simplicity is found to be our presence. But there are also aspects where the vision of your existence is simply how the intelligence of your moment is it's shapeless. We must have the freedom of creative expression and a tolerance by many human communities to allow human communication to enhance non-linearly as well. What that means is all those things you're calling weird, strange, odd, whatever labels you're giving it, they are still aspects of intelligence, do you know? It's like the intelligence doesn't care. You could go by a tree and be like, that tree is weird, the tree doesn't care, the tree is growing. Do you see? So both strangeness and that which we're considering normal is all growing, it's all manifesting. The garden has not stopped its purpose. It is man who forgets what he is by thinking he's a who. This existential intelligence is just as able to be within a multidimensionality that cannot be disturbed by individual dimensions. Sometimes you can never know what is happening until a sense of you decides to see that it was hollow, for what was keeping it was a greater observance. When you become observant, your intelligence works differently. When you become mindful, a bit more existentially sensitive, your intelligence works differently. This intelligence that is working differently begins to give you a sense of direct experience where you are not bothered by absence. You're actually fulfilled by it. What that means is your life doesn't have to be so complex that you get these many things, and life is beautiful and sufficient based on it being life, it being alive. Your livelihood is beyond interpretation, and so why did you think someone can judge you? I know people could judge me, but people could also judge the universe. What's the point if truth is not being directly experienced, or an honest man is forgetting himself? These words might seem different, because they are being suggested based on a future understanding that is going to be beyond space and time. What that means is a seer is not here to give the individual an answer. The seer is here to give the individual to the collective. And when I say give, that means you are giving yourself to your greater experience, just like how an eagle gives himself the greater experience of flying off from the branch and observing the whole forest. If you have a clear and honest intention, there is no disturbance that needs to disturb you. For beyond memory, freedom could never be shaped. The moment knows what to do. Be right here.